I tested 20 of the most popular types of bread to see how much they spike blood sugar, to help you decide which ones are better if you have diabetes and which ones to avoid. Here are the 20 breads we'll be discussing today: white bread, whole wheat bread, sourdough, keto bread, and more. A lot of people, including many healthcare professionals, will tell you that if you have diabetes, you should completely avoid bread to keep your blood sugar under control. I don't agree with that at all. Most of the people who say this don't even have diabetes, so they don't have first-hand experience. I've lived with diabetes for 35 years, and during that time, I've eaten every type of bread imaginable. After each meal, I tested my blood sugar using a glucose meter, so I know exactly how each type affects my blood sugar. I'm not a doctor or a nutritionist, and this isn't medical advice, but I've learned what works for me. Here are 3 simple rules I follow to choose the right bread for myself and to keep my blood sugar in check. Rule number 1. I choose bread that is low in carbs because carbs spike my blood sugar. Rule number 2. I choose bread that's high in fiber because fiber slows down digestion and helps prevent blood sugar spikes. Any bread with a carb-to-fiber ratio of around 5 or lower works for me. Rule number 3. I choose bread that has 0 or very little sugar, because sugar raises my blood glucose the fastest, and that's something we definitely want to avoid. Now, let's go through the types of bread I tested and discuss a few more tips to help you choose the right bread for yourself. White bread. Traditional white bread is made from flour, yeast, water, sugar, oil, and salt. These ingredients aren't exactly healthy. When we look at the label, this white bread contains 49 grams of carbs and 2 grams of fiber per 100 grams. Which gives it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 21, way higher than the 5 I aim for. Plus, it contains 5 grams of sugar, which is why I avoid white bread entirely. It spikes my blood sugar too quickly. Brown bread. Many people think brown bread is healthier and better for diabetics than white bread, but it depends on how it's made and what the ingredients are. If the brown color comes from molasses and the bread has a lot of sugar, it can be just as bad as white bread. However, if it's made with whole grain flour, it might be a better option for diabetics. This particular brown bread has 46 grams of carbs, 4 grams of fiber, and 3 grams of sugar per 100 grams. The carb-to-fiber ratio is 11, which is still too high for me, as it would spike my blood sugar too fast. I avoid this one, too. Whole wheat bread. Whole wheat bread is generally a better option for diabetics than regular bread because it's made from whole wheat grains, which contain fiber. But it's still important to check the label, because many bread manufacturers add sugar to improve the taste. This particular whole wheat bread has 44 grams of carbs, 6 grams of fiber, and 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Its carb-to-fiber ratio is 7, which is acceptable in an emergency, but the added sugar makes it less ideal. I would stay away from this one if possible and look for a better option. Multi-grain bread. Multi-grain bread is made with 2 or more types of grain, such as barley, flax, millet, oats, and whole wheat flour. The term multi-grain doesn't automatically mean healthy, though. It's often just a marketing tactic. The grains may be heavily processed, and they might not have the fiber benefits we're looking for. This multi-grain bread, for example, has 48 grams of carbs and 5 grams of fiber, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 9, which is too high. It has just 1.5 grams of sugar, which is good. But it would still spike my blood sugar too much, so I'd avoid it. Whole grain bread. Like whole wheat bread, whole grain bread is made from fully intact grains, such as barley, brown rice, and oats. These grains are rich in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Whole grain bread is often one of the most blood sugar-friendly options you can find. This particular organic whole grain bread I buy in Switzerland has 40 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fiber, which gives it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 4, perfect. It has just 1.5 grams of sugar per 100 grams, and based on my experience, this bread raises my blood sugar slowly and gently. I highly recommend this one, but be sure to check the labels of other whole grain breads, as some may contain added sugars that can spike your blood sugar. Baguette, brioche, croissant, ciabatta, focaccia, and cornbread. These types of bread all fall into the avoid category for me. They contain little to no fiber, have lots of added sugar, and will spike your blood sugar rapidly. They're not worth eating if you're trying to manage your diabetes. They're essentially empty calories with little nutritional value. Sourdough bread. Sourdough bread is made through a slow fermentation process, which can make it a better option for diabetics compared to other breads. The fermentation process breaks down some of the starches, causing sourdough to raise blood sugar more slowly than traditional bread. This makes sourdough a good choice for diabetics. While it's still important to check the ingredients and labels, since some sourdough breads may have added sugar, sourdough is generally a better choice than many other types of bread. If done right, the fermentation process of sourdough bread results in the formation of acetic acid, which is also found in apple cider vinegar. If you've watched my previous videos, you may know that acetic acid has a beneficial effect on blood glucose levels. Specifically, it helps reduce blood sugar spikes after meals that contain carbohydrates. However, not all sourdough breads are created equal, so once again, we need to look at the label. For example, this particular sourdough bread contains 51 grams of carbs and only 2 grams of fiber per 100 grams, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 23. Our goal is to keep this ratio under 5, so this sourdough would not be a good option for someone with diabetes. While the fermentation process and the acetic acid may help to some degree, the low fiber content in this bread will still cause a significant blood sugar spike. If you're looking for a better option, choose sourdough with more fiber and less sugar. Next, we have pumpernickel bread, which is made with rye flour and uses sourdough as a key ingredient. Pumpernickel typically has much higher fiber than regular bread, which is exactly what we're looking for. Additionally, because it contains sourdough, pumpernickel bread also benefits from the acetic acid that helps slow blood sugar spikes. Looking at a real example of pumpernickel bread, this one contains 47 grams of carbs and 7 grams of fiber, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 7, which is higher than what I usually prefer, but it's still manageable. The big plus here is that it only has 0.5 grams of sugar, and based on my personal experience, pumpernickel bread works very well for my blood sugar, with only a gentle spike after eating it. It also has a very distinct and robust flavor that not everyone may like, but if you haven't tried it yet, I recommend giving it a shot. Moving on to Ezekiel bread, this is a type of whole grain bread made from sprouted grains such as wheat, millet, barley, and spelt, along with legumes like beans, soybeans, or lentils. It's a great choice because it doesn't contain any refined flour or added sugar. One particular Ezekiel bread I checked has 44 grams of carbs and 8 grams of fiber per slice, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 4.5, which is excellent. It also has 0 sugar, making it a perfect option for diabetics. In my experience, Ezekiel bread provides a very slow glycemic response, causing only a gentle rise in blood sugar. It's full of healthy vitamins and minerals, and it works really well for me. However, it does have a specific taste and a dense, chewy texture that you might not love at first, but I really enjoy it. Just be aware that sprouted breads like Ezekiel bread tend to spoil faster, so you may need to refrigerate or freeze it if you plan on storing it for longer than a couple of days. Now, I still have 7 more types of bread to talk about, and some of them are really great options. But before I continue, I want to remind you that if you'd like to chat with me one-on-one or support me financially, there are 2 ways you can do that. First, you can book a coaching session with me, either for 45 or 90 minutes. The second, more affordable option is to join my Patreon, where you'll get access to exclusive content and a chance to join my VIP group. Next on the list is rye bread, which is made from rye flour. Rye grains are rich in nutrients and have a lower glycemic index than wheat, so rye bread is definitely an interesting option for diabetics. However, not all rye bread is equal, so as always, it's important to check the label. This particular rye bread has 48 grams of carbs and 6 grams of fiber per 100 grams, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of 8, which is higher than I prefer. It also contains nearly 4 grams of sugar, so I would avoid this one. However, in general, rye bread can still be a viable option, especially if you find a whole grain rye bread with more fiber and less sugar. The next 2 types of bread are pita bread and naan bread. Typically, these are heavily processed, very high in carbs, and low in fiber. They're often paired with unhealthy meals, which makes them problematic for blood sugar control. Personally, I would stay away from both pita and naan bread in their traditional forms, even though I love Indian cuisine. They're just not great for blood sugar management in my experience. Now, let's talk about keto bread and protein bread. I group these together because, although the terms are used differently, keto bread in the US and protein bread in Europe, they're often very similar, if not the same. Keto bread is a valid option for diabetics because it's very low in carbs and typically doesn't contain the heavy grains that make traditional bread so carb-heavy. Instead, it uses ingredients like almond flour, coconut flour, eggs, and sometimes cream cheese. When I eat true keto bread, my blood sugar doesn't spike at all, especially in the short term. One example I found has only 11 grams of carbs and 8 grams of fiber per slice, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of less than 2. It also has 4 grams of protein and no added sugar, so it looks like a solid choice. However, it's important to be cautious with keto bread, as it can be very high in fat and calories, which may not be ideal for those trying to lose weight. Additionally, some keto breads contain artificial ingredients, so always check the label. Finally, let's discuss flax and chia seed breads, which are both excellent choices for diabetics. Both flax and chia seeds are packed with fiber and very low in calories. These types of breads often contain other ingredients, so you need to pay attention to what else is included. For example, this organic flax and chia bread has 30 grams of carbs and 11 grams of fiber, giving it a carb-to-fiber ratio of less than 3, which is excellent. It does have almost 3 grams of sugar, but I still approve of this bread because the overall balance of carbs, fiber, and sugar works well for me. As always, be cautious of marketing tricks. There are some flax and chia breads out there that are made from refined white flour with a few seeds thrown on top. These are not what we're looking for. We want bread that's high in fiber, has a low glycemic index, and has a carb-to-fiber ratio under 8, ideally around 5 or lower, with as little sugar as possible. That way, our blood sugar won't spike too high after eating bread.